Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question is from John Brockman. Number 1, why are you getting rid of You Had to Ask? Number 2, why do you hate your fans? Number 3, how do you feel about the changes to Patreon? Number 4, what's going to happen to the shoutout? Number 5, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? I'll just take these one at a time. Number 1, because I hate my fans. Number 2, because they smell bad. Number 3, well, I wasn't thrilled with them, but then they reversed them, so they're not going to happen, at least not for now, or not in the same way, so I really don't feel anything about them anymore. Number 4, what's going to happen to the shout-out? I don't know. It probably will go away, but maybe I'll still give shout-outs to people or projects that I think deserve them from time to time. And number 5, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy. Any other questions? Probably several. So let me just address the ending of this series. Just in case any of you haven't heard before this, surprise, I am ending this series at the end of this month. And starting in January of 2018, going forward for the foreseeable future, I will only be producing 3 original videos a week instead of 5. So to cut down my production schedule, I will be no longer producing And Now the Good News or You Had to Ask. And the shows that I put up on Thursdays will go to Friday. So Friday will be the day when I upload an Atheist Reads videos or Steve and Stuffy videos, depending on what series is currently running. And I'm also putting 5 things on hiatus for a while and just using the Wednesday slot to be a little more open and to do things that I haven't really had time to do with my current production schedule, which is very packed and very regular. And I'm doing it because I want a change of pace. You know, I want to do different things, and the different things that I want to do include some videos that take a little bit more effort and a little bit more time to do and to get right. I need a little bit more than one day to turn around these videos that I want to do. And so I need to give myself some more space and some more time in my schedule to do them, and something had to give. Starting next month, I'm going to be doing live streams that will be devoted to interacting with viewers, to answering questions. And I will be taking questions from the live chat, which will be heavily moderated. I have already recruited a small army of moderators to make sure that the live chat will not be overrun by trolls and shit posters and neo-Nazis and all the other lovely people who I'm sure will descend to try and ruin everybody's fun. They're going to be handled, so I'll be taking questions from the chat. I'll also be taking questions from comments posted on previous videos, so those of you who won't be able to watch the live chats when they're actually streaming live will still be able to submit questions. And I'll be taking questions, of course, from my Patreon patrons. So there will be different avenues that you can use to submit questions to me, and I will still be answering viewer questions and talking about things that viewers want me to talk about or are curious about. It just won't be in this pre-produced, pre-recorded format, and it won't be every week. It'll be every other week. So that is not going away. It's just changing a little bit, and I'm doing it in a way that will fit better into my revamped production schedule. And until then, we only have 2. We still have this episode and then 2 more episodes of the old You Had to Ask to get through before things switch over to the new way. So let's get to some more questions, shall we? Cats and Communism. Besides from its problematic interpretation of transgender women, Dog Day Afternoon is my favorite film. One of those reasons is that there's only one song that's played, and that's at the beginning credits. The rest is just the powerful acting and ambience. I think more films should take this approach. Adding a song or a piece of the score to a specific scene can put me off certain films. Obviously, it depends on which films or genre you're talking about. Films like Star Wars, comic book movies, self-aware B-movies, or all Disney films wouldn't work without it. I find it patronizing, though, when the makers have to put a sad piano piece to let you know the characters feel sad in a supposedly serious or mature film, as if we couldn't already tell. I believe most of the time they just add it to cover up the hokey writing or meh acting. I swear to the gods, if I have to hear a generic orchestra in a political drama again, I will figuratively scream. What do you think, Steve? It's no different, really, than a laughter track on a sitcom. A really bad film score is no different than that. It's the movie giving you an audio cue telling you this is how you should feel about this. This is funny, laugh. This is sad, be sad. This is happy, be happy. And it's a really crude, really artless way to do it. And it can bring down otherwise good films. My favorite example of where a film score just completely trumps all over what could otherwise be a fine scene is the St. Crispin's Day speech in Kenneth Branagh's film of Henry V, which has this epic, heroic, surging score underneath it, building and building and driving as he's delivering the speech. And it takes a speech that is already very big and bombastic and heroic, and it makes it into just cheese. Like, it's so over the top that to me anyway, it becomes very difficult to take it seriously. Because Branagh's up there acting his fucking head off and going full Shakespeare, just giving this big, oh, what a great dramatic, heroic, epic speech, one of the great speeches in all of English drama. And underneath it is this epic score that's just underlining it and amplifying it more than it needs. And it totally kills it. The performance itself and the speech itself, the writing is more than enough. You don't need that score underneath propelling you and telling you, like, this is a big moment, this is a big moment, this is a big moment. It really, really ruins it. So yeah, I agree with you. And I love movie scores. When I was younger, I collected them. I still am a huge admirer of the guys who were big composers in film when I was growing up. The John Williams and the Jerry Goldsmiths and Alan Silvestris and James Horners, and then people that came in a little bit later like Danny Elfman and Howard Shore and Hans Zimmer, and people who were getting a lot of work and a lot of very justified praise in recent years, like Michael Giacchino and Carter Burwell. And Carter Burwell has been around for a long time, but he's sort of come in vogue in the last 5-10 years. So I love movie scores, but yeah, there are a lot of times when they aren't needed, or when the way they are used is entirely counterproductive to the scene or the film, and you'd be better off just leaving it out and allowing the performances to carry the scene instead. Scott Bresinger, have you heard about Quentin Tarantino's proposed R-rated Star Trek movie, which may actually be happening? What's your reaction? Are you excited, scared, or a bit of both? What do you think such a thing will be like? I realize it may be a long while before it shows up, and it may suffer a fate similar to Tim Burton's Superman, but I'm interested nonetheless. I am intrigued. I am very intrigued. I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino. I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, as all of you know, I'm sure. And I'm interested to see what a Quentin Tarantino produced, directed Star Trek film would be like. What would it sound like? What would it look like? What would Quentin Tarantino Star Trek dialogue sound like? I imagine that he would adjust his style at least a little bit to make it seem a little bit more at home in the Star Trek universe. But what would the dialogue of Quentin Tarantino in Star Trek sound like? What would it look like? What would it feel like? I get the feeling that as a director, Quentin Tarantino would be amazing for Star Trek, because he is a terrific director. He's an incredibly propulsive, kinetic director. He can really he can build tension like nobody else, and is just a wonderful talent at just getting your eye to just be fixed on the screen. He's a very arresting director, and I think he could do great in that milieu. And I feel like a Star Trek film directed by Quentin Tarantino that is good and that is a big commercial success could possibly help to salvage American big budget blockbuster action cinema, which has really just been wallowing in the mire for years and years and years, with all of these big, bloated, loud, obnoxious, incomprehensible action sequences directed by the likes of Zack Snyder and Michael Bay. These just really long, self-indulgent scenes that drag movies down and end up being dull and just off-putting. I think someone like Tarantino, who knows how to not only write dialogue, but also knows how to direct action, could be a great choice for Star Trek. But it could also be a disaster. He could also make a Quentin Tarantino movie, stereotypical Quentin Tarantino movie on the Enterprise, where, it's like, oh, it's Mexican standoffs and they're saying fuck and the N-word every other word, and oh my God, this is terrible. I don't think that he'll be allowed to do that. I don't think that's what will happen, but that's sort of the nightmare scenario of, just turn Quentin Tarantino loose on Star Trek and he'll remake it in his, demented image. And that's not what anybody wants, I don't think. So I'm a little trepidatious, but I'm very curious. And if it does end up happening, of course, I'll be there the opening weekend to see it. Andrew Hawkins, you mentioned people who claim to have respect for MLK Jr. but think today's Black Lives Matter is beyond the pale, which raises a question I've long had in the back of my head. If YouTube had been created 50 years ago, how many wrecked, MLK destroyed, and women's lib is cancer videos do you think there would be? When these people who will go out of their way to demean and vilify and defame and lie on Black Lives Matter and immigration rights activists and feminists and trans equality activists and gay equality activists, when they go out of their way to attack those people and build an audience on animus and bigotry toward those people and toward those movements, and then they turn around and say, oh, but you know who was a good guy, Martin Luther King. Fuck you. Do you really think anyone should believe that if you were alive today, you people who are saying Black Lives Matter are a bunch of criminals, you really think that if you were alive in the 60s, that you would have been one of the people who supported Martin Luther King when he was alive, when he was advocating for social change in the context of his culture? Of course, who the fuck are you kidding? These people who are anti-racial justice today, but want to play like, oh, if it had been in the 60s, I would have been all aboard with Martin Luther King. Fuck you. No, you wouldn't have. You would have been on the same side as all the people who threw the N-word around at Martin Luther King, who viewed him as a threat to the social order, who called him a criminal, who called him an agitator, who called him a revolutionary, and you would be on the same side then as you are right now. And the same thing goes for the people who are anti-feminism. You're anti-feminism today, you would have been anti-feminism 50 years ago, you would have been anti-feminism 100 years ago. Because if you look back, the arguments really haven't changed all that much. The arguments against women's suffrage sound a lot like the arguments against third wave feminism and education about consent and trying to counteract rape culture and all of the other things that modern day feminists are trying to accomplish and are being attacked and bullied and harassed over. It's the same shit, just a different decade. Becca Hawkins, hi Steve, my dad told me that he voted for Donald Trump because he saw Trump as the lesser of two evils. He thought Trump was bad, but he thought Hillary was worse because abortion. I'm honestly baffled by how evangelicals like my dad have convinced themselves that Trump was the better option. It's amazing how one note so many evangelicals are. Is she pro-choice? We'll go with the pussy grabber. Is she a Democrat? We'll go with that guy who made fun of the disabled reporter. How do we change hearts and minds on this in time for 2020 or even 2018? Or will this cycle among the GOP ever end? If your hope is to reform the GOP and to sort of salvage some of the soul or the ethics or the morality of that party, I think you are jousting at windmills. I just don't think that is a realistic goal in the short term. The good news is we don't need to change their hearts and minds in the short term to win elections and to create enough political power to at least begin to put back some of the protections that have been dismantled or threatened during the Trump administration so far, and to move ahead with more social progress that we were trying to get on track for over the last 8 years. All we need to do to take back the House, the Senate, the White House, state legislatures, governorships, local elections, all we need to do, and I say all as if it's easy, and it's not. It takes a lot of effort. But the key is not changing hearts and minds on the Republican side. The key is not flipping Republicans. The key is encouraging people and convincing people who do not vote to vote. And, just as importantly, having resources in place so that people who do want to vote but are unable to vote without a great deal of hardship because of voter suppression tactics almost always implemented by Republicans, are able to vote in spite of that, as we saw what happened in Alabama. In Alabama, black voter turnout especially was extraordinarily high, far higher than anticipated. And that was because there was a massive voter turnout apparatus in place on the ground, and because the consequences of losing the election were that Roy Moore, an accused child abuser, an accused child sex criminal, not to mention a religious zealot and all kinds of other awful things, would be elected to the United States Senate to represent Alabama. The consequences were so immediate and dire, and the effort to counteract the voter suppression efforts in place were so extensive and effective that the voter turnout among people who may not have voted otherwise was high enough that the Democrat was able to win. That is the winning strategy for Democrats and for liberals and leftists in general. Strong voter turnout. Encourage people who might not otherwise vote, or enable people who might not otherwise be able to vote easily to vote. Turn out the vote, because when voter turnout is high, Democrats and liberals and leftists, statistically speaking, tend to win a lot more than Republicans and more right-wing candidates. So that's the key. James Russell, what do you think of the relative merits of episodes 1 and 2 of the Star Wars prequels, since you haven't seen the third in full? I used to think Attack of the Clones was the worst of them, but on a rewatch a couple of years ago, I realized Phantom Menace was far worse than I'd remembered it being 15 years earlier. I haven't seen Attack of the Clones since I saw it in theaters when it first came out, and I hated it as soon as I saw it, and I haven't seen it again since. So I remember that as being the worst. But I will say, when I went back and rewatched Phantom Menace last year for our late seating podcast, it was a lot worse than I remembered it being. And I never thought it was good. Like, I always, whenever people would come out and give terrible reviews of it, or like when the Plinkett reviews came out and you really savaged the Phantom Menace, I was on board with all of that. I was like, oh yeah, this is a bad movie. But when I watched it again for the first time on my own last year after a long while, I was kind of surprised by how bad it was. I did not remember it being as bad as it was when I watched it again recently. So I'm with you that Phantom Menace is a lot worse than it was when I first saw it. But then again, if I watched Attack of the Clones again, and I think I'm going to have to next year for late seating, for our Star Wars episode, chances are it will be even worse than I remember it too. And I remember it being so bad that I almost walked out. When I saw it in the theaters, and Yoda pulled the lightsaber and started having that lightsaber duel with Christopher Lee, I almost walked out. It was one of the most insulting, awful things I've ever seen in a movie. And there were people in the theater, I'll never forget this, there were people in the theater that were cheering and applauding. And that's when I knew that our country was doomed. You know what the bell means? It means that it's time for the lightning round. Xenoblad, what's your view of the Justice Democrats movement trying to primary corporate-backed Democrats? I am in favor of it, not just because I think the idea of trying to break the hold of corporate interests on Congress is a good thing, but also because it would bring new blood into the system. It would bring new people into Congress, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's something that needs to happen more often, assuming, of course, that the people are qualified and are fit to serve. Ahoy, Earno, Steve, you're quickly becoming my only untarnished fave. Any skeletons in your closet? Now is the time to come clean. No, not really. I mean, I don't think A, I haven't had that interesting of a life, and B, I'm just not that much of a scumbag. Like, I've never been arrested. I have no criminal record to speak of at all. I don't even know of anything that I've done that could be blown up into a skeleton in my closet by uncharitable people who are trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. I haven't ever done anything that bad. I mean, I've done things in my personal life that I'm somewhat embarrassed by. I was a much bigger jerk. Like, the further back you go in my history, the bigger of a jerk I am. But I've never done anything really bad. Nothing that would, like, if I were running for political office, nothing that would destroy my career or anything like that. So I think you're good. I mean, don't expect me to be perfect, but I think you're good. I don't think there are any skeletons lurking in my closet. Certainly nothing that I'm that I'm afraid of. Like, oh shit, I hope I don't find out about that. Kaboom Splat Yuck 2. Steve, what would you do if you couldn't make YouTube videos? What job opportunities are available to you? Do you have a plan B if this site goes bye-bye? Other than making videos and posting them on some other site, and hoping my patrons will follow me. Writing articles, which I used to do to supplement my income in the past, and I guess I could just go to that full time. And if all else fails, I guess I would just have to get a real fucking job. That's an option that a lot of YouTube people never seem to consider. Like, maybe, if this whole thing goes belly up, we might all just have to go get real fucking jobs. Oh shit. Lucas Hackett, Steve, knowing that this might be the last time I ask you this, considering that net neutrality may or may not be gone at the time of this recording, I might ask you one thing. Blade Runner or Total Recall, and why? Thanks. I love that that's your last question in the net neutrality era. By the way, as I record this, they just voted to end net neutrality a few hours ago, so timely. Blade Runner. Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner is a more artistically accomplished movie. I think it's more interesting visually and in terms of its story. Total Recall is a fun movie, but I think that's all it is. It's like a fun, goofy, off-the-wall romp and a little bit of like a clever mindfuck kind of a movie. But I think Blade Runner is a better film. Radical Bacon, what's new? No more net neutrality. Other than that, I mean, not much. What's new with you? Sabrina Luzides Meredith, another holiday-related question for you, Steve. What do you think is the most overrated holiday movie ever, past or present? Oh, I don't know. I mean, until about a year ago, I would have said It's a Wonderful Life, but I watched It's a Wonderful Life fresh for late seating last year, and I actually liked it, so I can't really say that anymore. I don't know. It's the last few years, a lot of people have been talking about the movie Elf, like it's some kind of holiday classic. And I didn't hate it. I don't think it's like an awful movie, but I don't really see how it deserves the praise that it is getting from some people. So I might nominate Elf as most overrated. Captain Andy, hi Steve, what's your opinion of snow? I hate it. I hate it too, Andy. Solidarity. Snow haters unite. Yeah, I could do entirely without it. Harry Ray, I recently bought a $12 box of Cap'n Crunch. Imported U.S. food is expensive here, and it was pretty awful. Is it actually commonly eaten there? And do you like it? The big question is not why is it so expensive, but why did you pay $12 for an imported box of Cap'n Crunch? Anyway, I ate it when I was a kid. I haven't eaten it as an adult, at least not that I can remember, not for a very long time. I liked it as a kid. Like, it wasn't my favorite, but I certainly didn't hate it. And my memories of it are that it was pretty good, but, your mileage obviously may vary. DoctorBabylon, Steve, would you support repealing the Second Amendment? Recently, I went around asking my family members what they would change if they could amend the Constitution. My mom answered without hesitation that she would do away with the right to bear arms. From my understanding, the only thing the Second Amendment prohibits is a categorical ban on civilian gun ownership. And I don't think civilian gun ownership is itself a bad thing. I just think it needs to be way better regulated. What are your thoughts on this? Would you agree with my mom and totally do away with the Second Amendment if you had the power? Yes, I would. If I had a magic wand and I could just make ding, like magical changes to the Constitution, one of the first things I would do, possibly the first thing I would do, would be to get rid of the Second Amendment. That doesn't mean I would ban gun ownership, because those two things are very different. The NRA and the other gun rights lobbying groups try to conflate those two things, and they try to say, like, well, if they get rid of the Second Amendment, then you won't be able to own a gun. No. Matt Machado, hey Steve, have you heard about the new dance called the SJW Shuffle? It's like the Super Bowl Shuffle, except you're dancing for social justice. How does that song go? Protest inequality, cause a kerfluffle. That's how you do the SJW Shuffle. Like, is that it? Am I close? Does anybody know what he's talking about? I would be up for it, though. If some of my fellow SJWs wanted to get together and shoot a video, I mean, we would all have to be in the same place at the same time. I wouldn't want it to be just like a bunch of, webcam clips edited together. We'd all have to be there on a sound stage with a microphone and lights, so we could trade the mic off and each do a verse while the others were like in the background doing the dance, I mean, maybe we can do that for TAC. We can do the SJW Shuffle for TAC. That's not a promise. I just made that up off the top of my head. That probably won't happen, but TAC would be a good place for it to happen because a bunch of us will be there. Crow Bro, hey Steve, if you could snap your fingers and get rid of one New Age woo belief, what would it be? The law of attraction. The Secret. If I could snap my fingers and get rid of that, I would do that. But there's two problems with your premise. The first is, of course, I do not have that kind of power. And the second is, little known fact about me, I cannot snap my fingers. I've never been able to snap my fingers. I've never been able to do it. Get a little snap, but nothing. I don't get like the hard snap. Oh God, I'm such a limited being. I have so little talent. Even basic things that other people take for granted are just beyond my capability. Or, there it is. There's the skeleton in my closet. I can't snap my fingers. I can't snap my fingers. There you go. I hope I haven't lost your faith. I hope you'll stick with me through this trying time. I know that you've probably been disillusioned learning that I can't snap my fingers, but I have to be honest. Anyway, that was the last question. It's time now for the shout out. And the shout out this week is a little bit of a throwback. It's actually someone that I've given a shout out to in the past. But I was informed a couple weeks ago that the episode I gave him a shout out in is no longer available. It was one of the episodes, I think, that feature my lovely wife that I had to put on private due to online harassment from awful, shitty people. And therefore, unfortunately, the person who got the shout out in that episode also lost their shout out. So I'm going to restore the shout out because I'm a benevolent YouTube personality. And the shout out this week goes to a short film, a documentary that you can watch in its entirety on YouTube, produced by my friend and longtime YouTube viewer, Patrick Dodds. And it is about a video rental store in his hometown that is still struggling to survive in this digital age. And it is a film called Still Playing. Again, that's a documentary by my buddy Patrick Dodds, and I watched it a couple years ago when he first showed it to me, and I watched it again just recently before I did this, and it still holds up. It's a very, very interesting little slice of small town life, and you get to see how these wide cultural changes, like so many people moving from renting videos or going to a video store to rent movies to buying them online or getting them out of a machine like a Redbox or something, how those changes affect people right in a small town setting, how it changes lives for people in a practical way, and what it's like to be the owner of a business that now the business that you own, that whole category of things is becoming extinct. It's a really, really well done movie, and I highly recommend that you go check out Still Playing. There you go. Sorry for dropping out your shout out earlier, Patrick, but it's back now, buddy. And I hope people go check out your movie because it's really cool. And I also want to remind you, I mentioned it a minute ago, and my joke that is probably going to remain a joke, but who knows, about the SJW Shuffle. You can still get your tickets for TAC, the Atheist Conference that is coming up next year in New York City, July 6, 7, and 8 at the beautiful 4-star Roosevelt Hotel. The Atheist Conference, a conference featuring myself, featuring Mandisa Thomas, Christy Winters, ContraPoints, Aaron Ra, the one janitor. A bunch of other people are going to be there. You can go to the website and check out the speakers that have been scheduled. And of course, more speakers will be added as we get closer and closer to the date. It's a new conference, the first atheist conference of its kind ever held in New York City. And we're going to do our best to put our best foot forward as the atheist secular community. We're going to turn the page. There were some really, really awful things that happened in the atheist community this year, and TAC is our opportunity to do it right, to turn this thing around, to build a new atheist movement that is about progress and activism and inclusion and diversity and making the world a better place for atheists and for people in general. And I really hope that you can join us. You can go to theatheistconference.com to get your tickets and to reserve your room at the hotel at a fantastic discounted rate. I really, really hope that I see a bunch of you there next year at TAC. I also want to remind you, as I always do around this time, to check out the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are produced by my good buddy Jason Harding, and I specifically want to draw your attention to the Late Seating podcast, which is the belated movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, where we give a classic movie a fresh review and we decide whether it deserves its reputation, whether that reputation is good or bad. And you can listen to our most recent episode that just went up last week, which is our review of The Empire Strikes Back. And you can also get ready for our special Christmas episode that comes out next week, which is a live riff of the movie Home Alone. We're going to do a riff track like we did last year with It's a Wonderful Life. We're going to watch the movie and record live as we watch the movie. And then when you listen to the podcast, you watch Home Alone too, and you get our commentary as you watch the film. It's something that we've been doing for the last couple of years on Christmas. We really enjoy it. And that's coming next week. So this week, you can listen to the most recent episode. Get ready for next week with the Home Alone commentary track. You can listen to all the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to LemmeListenPodcast.com. That's it for me, everybody. I'm out of here. As I said at the beginning of the show, this series now only has 2 episodes left. So please get your questions in. If you want me to answer a question before You Had to Ask goes away and then is reborn in the new year as a occasional twice monthly live stream, you leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks for watching.